overall, are we pursuing a healthy dietary pattern? Are we maintaining our weight? Are we lifting properly? Are we getting enough sleep? All the things. Okay, so if you need to lose a little bit of weight, I wouldn't actually lose weight. I would actually go for body recomp, take advantage of being in a sufficient energy environment, and take advantage of those newbie gains for building muscle and losing fat. And then after you do that, you can decide what to do next. Welcome to the Wits and Weights podcast. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and this twice-a-week podcast is dedicated to helping you achieve physical self-mastery by getting stronger, optimizing your nutrition, and upgrading your body composition. We'll uncover science-backed strategies for movement, metabolism, muscle, and mindset with a skeptical eye on the fitness industry so you can look and feel your absolute best. Let's dive right in. Wits and Weights community, welcome to another solo episode of the Wits and Weights podcast. I hope you enjoyed our last episode, number 68, with Adrian Moreno, where we talked about tapping into your deepest emotions and telling your power story to unlock your potential. So go check that out. Today for episode 69, we are answering a question that I get all the time from listeners, potential clients, current clients, and that is, what should you do first to get the best results with your body composition? Should you lose fat, build muscle, aim for that magic of body recomp or body recomposition, where you lose fat and build muscle at the same time? And today I'm going to dive into scenarios that the vast majority of people fall into. I'm going to explain what your 6 to 12 month plan would look like if you want the best results that balances your health, physique, and performance. We're not talking about the extremes here. We're just talking about the general population, what most people are looking for to look and feel great. Now, having said that, these are all designed to focus all of your energy at one goal at a time so that you can do the whole process more efficiently, get to that finish line, get the quick wins, and then be in a really good position to go after the next goal. Now, before we get into the topic, I do have an announcement. You can now send me an audio voicemail directly to the show very easily. Whether you have a question, feedback, you just want to say hello, just go to podinbox.com/witsandweights, or even easier, just click the Q&A voicemail link in my show notes. Again, the Q&A voicemail link, you can send me a question and I will play it live on the next episode and then answer the question. Or if it's just feedback, I can play it as well. Speaking of listener feedback, I did want to take a moment to read a few of the recent 5-star reviews from listeners who I'm very, very grateful for. In fact, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to have this show and this platform to be able to share all of this same information that's helped me and I know will help you as well. So just 3 short reviews I want to read. The first is from Lady Blackwood, quote, "I've struggled with my weight for many years, one yo-yo diet after another. I've been searching for hope and a way out of the endless spiral, and I'm so glad I found this podcast." I mean, I see something like that, and it gives me hope that at least something of what we're sharing here is making a difference out there, and that's what we're all about. We have a review from Brian Montes who says, "The host is extremely knowledgeable about fitness and weight loss. The episodes provide actionable steps that you can implement immediately to help on a weight loss journey. Even if you're not looking to lose weight, this podcast helps you maintain a healthy lifestyle." And I want to recognize that the nuances of that review, because this is definitely not a show about weight loss. In fact, I try not to use the phrase weight loss very often. I usually use the term fat loss. But this listener definitely recognized that the things we do have a pleasant side effect of helping with our weight if that is something we struggle with and need to, reduce for our health as part of overall health and improving our body composition. And finally, Nicholas Natali writes, "Philip is knowledgeable in this space and enthusiastically provides strategies to shred fat and get jacked. I enjoy his excitement around the topic most." And again, I love it because everybody gets something a little bit different. And I am excited about this. I'm very passionate. And if it comes through too much, I don't apologize because that's me. And I hope you really enjoy that aspect of this podcast. So I am truly grateful for this opportunity to create the show, let alone impact the lives of anyone listening for the better. And I always, always appreciate hearing from listeners, whether it's through these reviews, by email, by social, or now by voicemail. So with that, let's get into today's topic: what to do first. Should I lose fat? Should I go into that calorie deficit and lose fat right away? Should I spend some time building muscle and being in a surplus? Or should I try for body recomposition? First things first, we're going to assume that you've already gone through a roughly 6 to 10 week maintenance phase where you establish your habits. Habits like tracking your food, getting sufficient protein, strength training at least, I would say 3 days a week, getting a decent step count, so 6, 8, 10,000 steps, improving your sleep hygiene, and managing stress. If you haven't gone through this foundational phase yet, I wouldn't even consider going after a specific body composition goal until you do, because it is that important to being successful. And if this is the first show you've ever listened to with me, and this is a surprise or you're wondering what this is all about, go back and check out episode 25. Now, the title is Lose 30 Pounds or More the Right Way and Keep It Off, which maybe it's not just about losing a lot of weight. Even if you don't have weight to lose, I actually spend a good amount of time in there going into detail about this metabolic prep phase or primer phase or pre-diet maintenance, whatever you call it. So you don't have to listen to the whole episode, but listen for that section and how I describe it and the steps to get there. And this is what I do with all my clients when we start. We don't go right into a diet. We don't go right into a muscle building phase. We get things normalized first. Now, once you know your maintenance calories and you have solid practices in place for training, steps, and recovery, you're ready to go after your transformation. So first I want to address, I've said first multiple times today, but let's quickly address some of those mistakes, the general mistakes that people make when going through this kind of transformation. And by the way, I've been there for years and years and years. I tried to transform my body and it was always either random, it was an extreme, it was restrictive, or I just didn't know what I was doing, right? So I would get 2 pieces right and I would miss the third piece or something like that. So these are the big mistakes that I see. Okay. And the first one is setting an unrealistic goal. I'm all for ambitious goals for sure. Okay. And once we go through all the scenarios and expectations today, you'll know what I mean by unrealistic. I'd rather you achieve significant progress within the realm of possibility, even if that possibility could still be a far reach from where you are today. I'd rather you do that than overreach for some massive progress and then be unable to stick with the process to get there. And then that sets you back even longer, right? So it's that fine balance, setting the unrealistic goal. Second, being inconsistent with your training. Okay. While you're going for building muscle, recomp or fat loss, the training is one of the key principles that have to be in there the whole time. So you have to be consistent, right? You can't do it 3 days this week, take a week off, then 2 days and take a week off, and then some random time frame, and then finally you're back at it, and so on, because you're going to leave gains on the table or you're going to lose muscle during fat loss without that consistency. The next mistake people make is not tracking your numbers. And I say it that way because I don't have to be dogmatic about which numbers you track. If you're working with me as a client, we're tracking everything basically, because I feel that the more numbers you have, the more data you have, the better decisions you can make at the cost of a little bit more inconvenience. I get it. But we're talking calorie and macro intake, scale and weight trend over time, your body circumference measurements, your lifting progression. I want to see, are you going up in weight every session on your squat? Biofeedback like hunger, energy, stress, sleep, and so on. How you look and feel, which could be measured by photos, by the mirror, and how your clothes fit. So all of these are objective measures. Even how you look, that is objective because it's something that can be quantified visually and then compared to over time. And then the last mistake people make is, I guess that was the last mistake. But basically, if you are consistent and you continue to adjust your plan based on all of this, including your numbers, you will inevitably make progress. And to hit those precisely, in my opinion, you'll need to track your food. Now, if you're listening to this, you're like, I don't track macros. I don't track food. Either you've done it before and you've developed intuition where you can do it pretty well, like good enough for a fat loss or muscle building phase, or you're just refusing to accept that this is necessary to make progress. And it is. If you don't like this, if you don't want to do this, you can still make progress, but it could be inconsistent. It could take longer than you'd like, and it might result in a less optimal final body composition and then require you to go through multiple phases or iterations to get there. You're just going to lack the information you need to make those adjustments and decisions. And if you're cool with that, knowing that it might take longer, fine, but I highly recommend tracking your food. And the app that I use, all my clients use, it's called Macro Factor. I would look for it in the App Store, and you could use my code WITS and WEIGHTS, all one word, and that'll extend your free trial. You don't have to use it, but if you do, it supports me, so I thank you for that. Again, the code is WITS and WEIGHTS. In my opinion, Macro Factor blows away every other app, and I've tried them all. I've looked at them all. MyFitnessPal Chronometer, Carbon, RP, all of them. And it's far superior in my opinion. So feel free to pause this episode right now, go download Macro Factor, enter my code WITS and WEIGHTS, and start tracking your food and weight. I mean, literally do it right now. Pause the episode and go download it. Check it out. Even take some time to play around with it. You can send me a message with a question. I'll point you to resources and help you get it going, because this is going to give you a ton of helpful data to make progress. Okay, and you're going to hit your goals more quickly and more easily. All right, with all that out of the way, let's get into it. Unless I mention otherwise, the scenarios I'm going to talk about, the first 5 of the 7 scenarios assumes you're either untrained, so you've never lifted weights properly or intelligently before. Okay, that was me for like 10 years. I lifted weights, but I wasn't doing it the right way. And this assumes you've never done it, with progressive overload to properly build muscle. Or it assumes that you are detrained, which means you used to have some muscle and used to train, but you've regressed after months or probably years of not training. And then I'm going to cover trained individuals in the last 2 scenarios. Okay, so scenario 1 is when you have some weight to lose, like 10 to 20 pounds. I think that's a good range, 10 to 20 pounds. And this is a lot of people who maybe you've dieted multiple times over the years, or maybe you're getting a little bit older and that fat's starting to creep up because your metabolism's slowing down because you don't quite have the muscle mass anymore. And I would say if you're there or at the higher end of skinny fat, right? And you kind of know who you are, where you don't really look quote unquote heavy on the outside while you're wearing clothes, but you've got some soft spots and you want to get rid of them. Okay. So in this scenario where you have a little bit of weight or at your higher end of skinny fat, I would go for body recomposition. Okay, this is the only scenario where I'm going to say that. So body recomposition is where you don't gain any weight or lose any weight, but you build muscle while losing fat at the same time. And to do this, you'll have to stay at your maintenance calories. So all this stuff I just went over and spent all that time talking about with the pre-diet maintenance, with tracking your food, with using Macro Factor, that needs to all be set up and cranking along for about 6 to 10 weeks so you know what your maintenance calories are. And then you could precisely go after body recomp, because even being at maintenance still requires some precision to make sure you're not going in the direction you don't want to go. So in this phase, what I would do is I would monitor things like my circumference measurements, photos, and how your clothes are fitting, because your scale weight's not going to change, right? You're actually intentionally trying not to go up or down in scale weight, but you're trying to improve how you feel in your clothes, the fit, your strength, your lifts, and your biceps, all these other things. Your lifts should progress. They may not be crazy progression like they might be if you were eating more, but they shouldn't stall. They should definitely progress if you're a newbie. The other thing is hunger, digestion, things like that shouldn't really be an issue because you're getting sufficient calories. You're at least at maintenance. You're in that mildly anabolic environment. If hunger and digestion are an issue, we want to look at our food selection and pay attention to things like volume and fiber. But I don't want to chase hacks to fix these things. I want to look at the whole picture, right? Are we pursuing a healthy dietary pattern? Are we maintaining our weight? Are we lifting properly? Are we getting enough sleep? All the things. Okay, so if you need to lose a little bit of weight, I wouldn't actually lose weight. I would actually go for body recomp, take advantage of being in a sufficient energy environment, and take advantage of those newbie gains for building muscle and losing fat. And then after you do that, you can decide what to do next. Okay? Because you may find that you look great, you're perfectly where you want to be, and you're actually 10 pounds heavier than you thought you needed to be. Hey listeners, this is Philip Pape, and I'm excited to announce our upcoming, totally free 21-day challenge starting December 1st. It's called the Wits and Weights No Diet Holiday Body Recomp Challenge. This challenge is about learning how to achieve body recomposition. That's building muscle and losing fat at the same time without dieting or restriction throughout the holidays. I'll be giving you free videos, guides, and personalized coaching in a private group chat to help you enjoy the holidays while being satisfied and guilt-free. The kickoff call is Friday, November 17, and the link to enroll is in the show notes. No matter what episode you are listening to, don't worry. If you're hearing this after November 17, you can still register and get access to the replay and resources before the challenge starts on December 1st. Again, to join the Wits and Weights No Diet Holiday Body Recomp Challenge to build muscle and lose fat without dieting through the holidays, click the link in my show notes. Now back to the episode. Scenario 2 is you have even more weight to lose. We're going to say between 20 and 40 pounds. Okay, so this is a decent amount of weight to lose, but you're not considered in that obese level of excessive unhealthy weight. 20 to 40 pounds, I would go for conservative fat loss. Okay, conservative meaning for about 12 to 16 weeks, you want to lose between 1/4 to 0.75% of your body weight per week. So you may have heard me talk about on the show the range of fat loss that's considered acceptable without losing muscle is 0.25 to 1%. So I'm kind of clipping that upper end to 0.75%. So basically, you're looking around 0.5% body weight a week. So if you weigh 200 pounds, that's a pound a week, all right? This is a balance between consistency and progress, because if you go too aggressive, you're just not going to be eating very much. You're going to be a little bit, I'm not going to say miserable, but I mean, it's going to be tougher on yourself, which risks you falling off the wagon and not being consistent and not making progress. So we want to make progress, but we want to go aggressive enough so that the fat also comes off. So this is where a 12 to 16 week plan, 1/4 to 0.75%, so around 0.5% of body weight. Now, here's what might happen. When you start this, you might initially see a weight plateau because you're getting body recomp. Just like in scenario 1, you're actually getting body recomp in the early phases. You're not really even trying to. You're actually trying to lose fat, trying to make the scale weight go down. But your muscle building is outpacing your fat loss, and your scale weight starts to plateau. Again, this is where we need to have our body measurements, our clothes, how they feel, how we look, all of those things. Because I have to deal with clients with this all the time where they have 30 pounds to lose. And the first few weeks when we start the fat loss phase, it doesn't go as fast as we'd like, but then all of a sudden their waist circumference comes down. And they're getting new PRs on all their lifts for weeks, if not months. That's a good sign, okay? So your lifting will probably progress modestly if you're a beginner. It may plateau after a while, but I wouldn't expect a big plateau early on because you're new to it, okay? So this is kind of another sweet spot where you're getting a little bit of recomp and you're getting some fat loss. And if you see plateaus going beyond that, I would make sure your step count is high enough, right? We sometimes forget about that as we go into a diet. Our natural movements tend to slow down, our unconscious movements, and we just move less to make up for it without even thinking about it. And so we have to consciously track our steps and keep that expenditure a little bit higher, okay? So that's scenario 2, losing 20 to 40 pounds, conservative fat loss. Hey, this is Philip, and I hope you're enjoying this episode of Wits and Weights. If you're looking to connect with like-minded listeners on their health and fitness journeys, come join our free Facebook community. It's a supportive space where you can share your experiences, ask questions, and access free guides and weekly trainings. Just search for Wits and Weights on Facebook or find the link in the show notes. Now back to the show. Scenario number 3 is if you have a lot of weight to lose. So we're talking 40, 50, 60 pounds or more. And this is a pretty simple scenario. It's aggressive. We want to go for aggressive fat loss. So similar time frame to start as the last scenario. We're going to say 12 to 16 weeks, but I would keep it up to the upper end, more of a half to 1% of your body weight per week, because you're at a much higher body weight. You're probably at a higher expenditure. You can handle roughly the same amount of calories as somebody lighter than you, but that's going to put you into a bigger deficit, meaning you'll lose fat more quickly. Now, not always. This is why I give you a range of a half to 1%. If your metabolism is pretty low, it's going to be a little more challenging. But what I would do is I would plan for 12 to 16 weeks, monitor all the things, stay on top of your expenditure. If you're using Macro Factor, you'll know exactly what you need to eat every week. And then use diet breaks if you have to break it up into longer phases. So if you're 200 pounds and you go at 1% a week, after 16 weeks, you're going to lose roughly 32 pounds. It's still not 50 pounds, right? So taking a break, bringing your carbs up and getting back to maintenance for several weeks or even months is really good psychologically. Okay, psychologically. Don't believe the hype about refeeds, about taking 3 days or a week and you're cranking up your leptin and everything recovers and all of a sudden you can continue your diet at a healthier state with more calories. It doesn't quite work that way. As soon as you start dieting again, you're going to readapt back to where you were. But here's the thing. A refeed or a diet break can give you a mental boost. And there is something to be said about the extra performance in the gym and the recovery and the sleep and the lack of stress that does give your body a little bit of a reset so that when you continue the diet, you're fresh when you start. And there is that to be said for it, okay? So when we're losing 50 pounds or more, it's all about fat loss. We have to use our biofeedback and track our hunger. We don't want to let ourselves get ravenous where all of a sudden we binge. We overeat, we emotionally eat. We have to do all the strategies and planning that we like to talk about on this show, like meal prepping, meal planning, eating lots of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and so on, and tracking your numbers and being aware of what adjustments you need to make. Now, here's one thing that might happen. And this could have happened in the last scenario as well, but I especially see it here when you're just on a prolonged fat loss phase, is the calories can start to get somewhat low, and you're trying to keep your protein high. And all of a sudden you're like, I really don't have much room for fats and carbs. My carbs are down like 100 grams or even less. And I'm feeling sluggish and I'm feeling sore and I'm not recovering. And my sleep is a little bit restless. This is where we can say, all right, we don't need that much protein. If you're at like a gram per pound, we can go down to 0.8, 0.7, even 0.6 if we have to, and give all that to carbs and maybe a little bit of fats. Sometimes it's the fats that's too low, to be honest, especially for women is what I found. Just getting that extra 10 grams a day could make all the difference. So we have to make these compromises and these trade-offs. The idea here is to be consistent, make progress, lose fat, period. Okay? And a little bit of compromise between some of these variables goes a long way. So this is a mind game. We have to get ahead of issues when they come up, and don't be afraid to take a break. Maybe it's for a holiday, maybe it's for a trip, something else where you plan in the extra calories rather than it being something that you lost control of. All right. And then along the way, you're also probably going to get some recomposition because you're new at this. Okay. I've had clients who were 50, 70 pounds overweight. And when they started, because they hadn't been training or moving, and now they start losing weight, and all of a sudden their expenditure starts going up at the same time, and their calories don't have to change. Like they start at 2,000, let's say 2,200 calories, and they start losing 1% a week. And all of a sudden they, let's say not 1% a week. Let's say they're going 0.5% a week, and all of a sudden their expenditure comes up and they start losing at a faster rate without changing their calories. Or they increase the rate by barely changing their calories. Or I'm sorry, that's what I just said. The same thing in two different ways. Apologize. So you could go at a faster rate by staying at the same calories because your expenditure is increasing, or you could increase your calories and eat more and stay at the same rate. That's where I was trying to go. Okay. So you might be eating 2,000 calories and then all of a sudden you could eat 2,200 calories and continue losing at the same rate. That's a really nice place to be. Okay, so that was the third scenario. That was a large amount of fat loss. And by the way, the reason I suggest these specific directions has to do with that balance I mentioned before between health, performance, and aesthetics or physique, right? We're trying to balance them all, but going after one goal at a time. So I'm sort of giving you the most efficient goal to go after based on your starting point. And by the way, when you do that, eventually you will end up in another scenario, most likely the trained scenarios that I'm going to get to. All right. So scenario 4 is you're at the lower end of skinny fat. This is where you really don't need to be any lighter on the scale, right? If you have your clothes on, you kind of look skinny. None of these words are meant to be judgmental. It's just our language. We understand what we mean by them. And you don't need to lose any weight, but you need to add muscle. So in this case, I would go for conservative muscle gain. Okay, some people might recommend trying for a body recomp here, but honestly, I think you can stand to push it a little bit on the gaining side, and you're still going to have some body recomp while gaining, which would be awesome. Meaning you might actually lose some fat while you're gaining weight. You may not, but the amount of fat gain should be pretty darn minimal if you're doing it in this conservative fashion. So we want to go for a 6 to 9 month plan, gaining around 0.1% body weight per week. This is as lean gains as we get, because I would recommend between 0.1 and 0.25% when you gain. And here I'm talking about the lower end of that, 0.1%. So you're barely going to gain any weight, but you'll be in an anabolic environment to feed that muscle building for your newbie gains. Okay, so it's like a lean gain / body recomp, and you're maximizing muscle growth, you're limiting fat gain to near zero, or at least behind the pace of your muscle gain, meaning the muscle to fat ratio is actually higher than 1-to-1. For somebody like me who's been training for a while, it's the opposite, right? I tend to gain a little more fat than I do muscle as I gain, just because it's hard for me to add additional muscle in absolute terms. But if you're skinny fat and you've never trained, you're going to like pack on that muscle and not much fat. And that's what we want to go for. And throughout this process, you just got to enjoy learning to eat more, which can be a challenge for some people, especially if you're a hard gainer, which we'll talk about in a second. And you can enjoy lifting more. You should be making really steady progress, session after session, week after week on your lifts. Okay, so the next scenario is you are lean and untrained, which is lean is different than skinny fat. Skinny fat is lightweight on the scale, but you have your body composition is a fairly high body fat percentage, which is what most people are once they get into their, let's say 40s or 50s. They've dieted a bunch of times and haven't really trained properly. Okay, but they keep dieting and getting their scale weight down. This scenario 5, is when you're lean and untrained. And it's because you either haven't dieted very often, maybe you've just sat at that weight for years with no muscle, or you're young, like in your late teens or early 20s, and you just haven't had the opportunity to gain much fat. This could also include hard gainers. Okay, hard gainers, people who on the surface seem to have trouble gaining weight. And I'll explain why that is. So in this scenario, if you're lean and you're untrained, lean, you don't have much body fat, and you're light and you haven't trained, go for aggressive muscle gain, period. So if you're a 20-year-old male and you just are skinny, go for this. Go for all the gains you can. 6 to 9 months, gaining 0.2 to 0.4% body weight per week. This is not a dreamer bulk. This is not try to gain 1% every week, because that is going to gain too much fat. But it is going on the more aggressive side. So 0.3, 0.35, 0.4% of your body weight per week. 0.4% body weight per week is what? 1.2, 1.3% per month. So that's a decent amount of weight gain. After 9 months, you're talking over 10%. So you have to be okay with gaining some fat when you do this. And in fact, I would welcome it. That extra fat is going to allow you to move more weight, and it's going to allow you to lift more. All right. Enjoy that, the progress on your lifts. Enjoy filling out your shirt. Like, those are the things you want to pay attention to if you're talking about body recomp is, hey, my biceps are filling out my shirt. Now, if you're a hard gainer, if you have trouble gaining weight, it's a very real thing where because every time you eat more food, every time you eat another 100 calories, your body might actually upregulate and burn 50 more calories. And so your metabolism is catching up to your intake, not all the way, but enough where you feel like, man, I have to keep eating more and more just to gain weight. And in that case, the reality is, yes, you're going to have to eat more and more. This is why we want to track. Use something like MacroFactor, where it gives you the surplus you need to stay in that rate of gain. But now you have to start looking at strategies of how to do that, right? Eating more fats, eating more calorie-dense foods, things like that, without going into the processed foods all the time territory, or eating fast foods or milkshakes or whatever. There's a good balance. There's foods like nuts, oil, adding oil to your foods, things like that are nice little, I don't want to say tricks. They're just ways to scale up the calorie density to gain more if you're in that scenario. So the big thing here is to optimize things like your workout nutrition and your performance so that you could maximize that maximize that muscle growth. Okay. Lifting really hard, heavy, training properly, and getting that recovery. Okay. So scenarios 6 and 7 are if you are trained. Okay. So scenario 6 is if you're trained and you're lean. So you've been training and you've gone through a cut or a fat loss phase. And now you're at the low end of where you'd like to be. So you might see your six pack, you might see your muscle definition. It all depends on who you are. For a male, this might be 10%, 12% body fat, something like that. Maybe it's 8. It really depends on you, but it's that lower limit you've set for yourself. In that case, we're going to go for moderate muscle gain. So this is just a standard building phase, which what scenario 7 is going to be. It's going to be the opposite of that. So I always recommend if you're trained, if you're getting back to a new building phase, 6 to 9 months, 0.1 to 0.25% of your body weight per week, the standard range. Monitor your numbers, use your measurements, monitor your look and feel, your photos. And I like to use the Navy formula along with my photos and how I look in the mirror to track my body fat. So once I'm doing this, it's pretty consistent. I know my limits at the top end and the bottom end. How much body fat do I want to allow myself to get to? And then how low do I want to go? Where I kind of toggle back and forth between this quote unquote lean but healthy range. Not so lean that you're unhealthy or, kind of that bodybuilding range, and not getting to where you're an unhealthy level of fat for things like your blood pressure, resting heart rate, and so on. So again, you just want to always be training hard. You want to use periodization. This is where you can start having fun as you become an intermediate trainee and incorporate other modes of programming like conjugate, right, West Side, or bodybuilding training, 4 and 5 day splits, power building, and so on. Okay. And then scenario 7 is just the opposite of that. You are trained and now you're hitting that upper limit of your body fat, which for some of us, it's higher than we think, meaning, it goes in both directions. Either you're the type of person that feels like, oh no, I'm getting too fat, and you're really not that fat. You just might have a little extra belly there, which is not a bad thing when you're trying to lift a lot of weight. And it's healthy to have a little bit of fat there. Or you might be the type of person that's okay getting way up into the, say for males, 20% of body fat before you cut. Guess what? It's all okay. It depends on your priorities. For me, I want to keep my health markers in a good place. So I tend to live a little bit lighter than some of my, lifting buddies would want me to stay. But that's just me. Okay. I'm in my 40s. I've had back issues. I've had, minor health issues, and I like to keep everything in check. However, I am in the middle of a 9-month building phase, and I'm going to push it a little bit when I get to the end, but then I'm going to probably push it back the other way with my cut. So if you're at the upper limit of your body fat, here's where you're going to go for a fat loss phase at your preference. This is the only one where I leave some wiggle room. So you're either going to do something like 12 or even 16 weeks at like 1/4 to 0.75% per week, or you're going to shorten that and do like an 8 to 12 week mini cut at the full 1% per week. So if your expenditure is nice and high, if you've built a lot of muscle, I'm finding more and more flexibility now that I could eat more. So when I go on a diet, it's really not that much of a struggle anymore. I can go really aggressive and get it over with quickly. Okay. You've done this before. Keep everything consistent, scale down your meals, focus on volume. Don't change anything drastically. Just hit those targets, those calories, the protein, and so on. Okay, so let's recap the 7 scenarios. Scenario 1, a little bit of weight to lose, body recomposition. Scenario 2, a little more weight to lose, 20 to 40 pounds, conservative fat loss. Scenario 3, a lot of weight to lose, 50 or more pounds, aggressive fat loss. Scenario 4 is skinny fat. I would gain muscle conservatively. Scenario 5 is you're lean and untrained. I would gain muscle aggressively. Scenario 6 is you're trained at the lower limit of your body fat. You want to do a typical standard muscle building phase. And then scenario 7, you are trained and you're hitting the upper limit of your body fat. I would just go for fat loss at your preference as aggressively as you want. All right. I hope you now have an exact starting point based on your current body composition from those scenarios. But if you do still have questions, and there always are specific questions for your circumstance, I'm always happy to jump on a free 30-minute call to go over your individual case, come up with a 6 to 12-month plan that works for you. Just use the link in my show notes for that free call. And my goal with these calls is to get you answers. It's not to sell you anything. I really want to get you an answer because I know how frustrating that is for me to not know what to do. I don't mention my services. I don't mention my pricing unless you ask me. So my mission here is to impact as many lives as possible. And if you're educated about evidence-based fitness and nutrition, this rubs off on everyone around you. It makes us all healthier and happier. And this is where my passion comes from. And I hope it does for you as well, listening to this. Next week, for episode 70, I'm having a conversation with none other than Cody McBroom, where we dive into topics related to looking like you lift, from using data, like we talked about today, to balancing aesthetics and performance, to overcoming plateaus. Make sure to follow or subscribe to the show, to the Wits and Weights podcast right now in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss it. As always, stay strong, and I'll talk to you next time here on the Wits and Weights podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Wits and Weights. If you found value in today's episode and know someone else who's looking to level up their wits or weights, please take a moment to share this episode with them. And make sure to hit the follow button in your podcast platform right now to catch the next episode. Until then, stay strong.